I think we are actually in a very exciting period of time right now with all the change that's going on. And I think that one of the things I want to talk about tonight is trying to take a lot of the concepts that Rex discussed and try to bring those back into where I can ground them, because the way that I look at the world is through the physical environment. And so there's a lot of concepts out there that Rex discussed, which are all about leadership and culture. I don't know that I can profess to be an expert in that, but what I can do is help you to shape your work environments that will help to take advantage of those concepts that Rex discussed. So I think one of the things that I'd like to say is that Rex, it was an awesome experience for me, I think, for the past 2 years to be involved in the Case for Space project. There were a lot of super smart people that were involved in that, and I think it really did open my eyes and change the way that I look at the workplace today, because I think that workplace is that one place where everything comes crashing together, and businesses really have to depend on that in order to grow and sustain their businesses over time. And so it was a fantastic experience, and so I was very proud to be part of that whole process, and I think the entire firm has kind of benefited from it. What I kind of wanted to do is take a little bit of a step back in time, and as an industry, not that long ago, we would design these 10 by 15 cardboard boxes. We put acoustical tile ceilings in there with a fluorescent light fixture. It was probably this off-color blue. It probably hummed a little bit. There was some off-gassing carpet that was in that environment, and then we were recirculating the air through the space over and over and over again. Your boss put you in that environment and expected you to do your best work. And if you think about it, it's almost oxymoronic. I mean, the gorilla in the zoo has a better work environment than that. But yet today, that's really what probably 80% of corporate America is still working in. So, I think that that's, one of the things that I think we think about it when we're starting. We're really dealing with people who have actually gotten very comfortable working in these environments, and we have to pry them out of it. I think if you dig a little deeper and try to understand a little bit more about how we account for office space today, it falls on the cost side of the ledger. So it's an overhead expense. And so what do we do with overhead? We want to squeeze it. We want to maximize the efficiency of it. We want to standardize it. We want to cut. We want to, try to minimize it as best we can, because we look at it purely as a cost side, and we don't understand the value, the potential that it has to bring. And so that's, I think, one of the topics that I'd like to kind of dive into a little bit deeper today. I think in my career, going back, the holy grail was that 250 square feet per person. And that measure that we constantly strove for. But if you understood what 250 square feet per person was, it was an average across a very broad spectrum of different types of spaces. It really had no context in each organization that we looked at. There were huge differences in each of those organizations. And we always strove for that 250 square feet, but it really wasn't tied to anything that was kind of connected to that. The other part of that is Rex talked about some of the technology and the way that we work that's come into the space today. The technology has really freed us from the office. And so you kind of almost have to think about space as, what's the value? Why am I there? Why is it worth me sitting in traffic for 45 minutes 2 times a day to get to that environment when I really don't have to be there unless there's some reason for me to be there? So as a result of that, 50% of the office space that we build today is underutilized. So in any office, I would be willing to bet in any of your offices, you walk through it today, half of that office is probably not occupied. And so I think that's some of the issues that we're dealing with clients that are in existing space that has been built many years ago. Now you add to that, I think there's all these conversations that are out there taking place about the new work environments, alternative officing, the free address, activity-based design, all of these different topics that we're talking about. Open versus closed. There's a lot of articles that out there that talk about how bad the open office environment is. It's distracting. People can't get work done. Germs are jumping everywhere, and so. That's another issue I think that we have to deal with. So there's all these conflicting priorities, And what that has led to, which is where I think we are today, where I think we've reached the tipping point, and I think everybody realizes and understands that we need a new environment to work in, but there's a lot of confusion, and we're still dealing with a tremendous amount of resistance to change. And so a lot of our time is really spent, kind of dealing with all of the change management issues and going through the whole process and having people understand, how they work, the type of work that's being done, and really connecting that to the culture of each organization. So one of the things that came out of the Case for Space work was that, if you stop and think about work, that you go to and essentially a great day in the office, and what's that experience like, and how can we capture that and build upon that? So the work that, when it's at its best is really social and engaging. You're connecting with people, there's a lot of productivity, you're getting things done, you're feeling a sense of accomplishment. And so I think that's the one thing that I'd like to try to stop and, really reframe the discussion, because, that's much more important than all of these metrics today. So, if I stop and say, what's the problem? The problem is that a lot of the metrics that we've been dealing with are really blind, to the hidden value. So, the 250 square feet really doesn't represent the levels of productivity and the engagement and the culture and the potential that your organization has. I think the other thing is that as the commercial real estate industry, we've gotten into this, cost per square foot syndrome. And, we look at everything as a cost per square foot. And I think for the commercial real estate and the development community, there's probably still a lot of merit to that metric. But I think when we look at a lot of your organizations, it becomes disconnected. I don't think anybody in here has a measure that connects to square footage when you really look at what your business is and the metrics that you're using that perform to that. Rex talked about the S&P 500 companies, and this is one of the things that was like a splinter in my brain going through the whole Case for Space exercise. I was just amazed, when I started to see these numbers, and it was a constant question in my mind, why? Why is this happening? And Rex kind of stole my thunder. I like to tell the story about Kodak, and this is one that just confounds me. Here's a company that had a 90% market share. They had $16 billion of revenue, 145,000 people. They invent the digital camera. They didn't have a clue what to do with it. They were coming up with all these ideas about what it could be, and very few of those actually made it to the market. What happened is Fujifilm was nipping at their heels, and Sony came in and basically stole their lunch. This is what the past 10 years of revenue look like for Kodak. And I look at that, and that's a precipitous drop. That's a 15 to 20% drop in revenue every year. How can a company go through that and not realize that there's a huge problem? I mean, it confounds me. And so then I thought, okay, let's look at a company that we think is doing it right, and look at what the other kind of conditions are. So if I look at Google as an example, and there's been a lot of material published on the office space and how Google treats their people. We were fortunate to have them participate as part of the Case for Space team, so I think we got some very unique insight to them. And so then I did the same thing. I went back and I said, let me look at the revenue of Google, over the past, in this case, it's 12 years. And I'm saying, how can that company do that? And so when you think about it, or at least when I think about it, from the workplace standpoint, I mean, these are workplace issues. I think Rex talked about some of those types of organizations that are bound by tradition, have to fight complacency. You got the fat guy sitting in his office that's very happy and doesn't want to interact with anybody and can't exchange those ideas. And so, for me, this is really about business. I mean, our practice is one that's immersed in the commercial office market. We're dealing with clients and their businesses every day. And so, part of my philosophy is if any money that I spend on our office space, that's an investment. And I think, just like me, you guys should expect to get a return back on that investment. And so, we want to try to maximize the revenue, look for ways that you can increase productivity and really kind of bring your people in and engage them and maximize the potential that they have. And we want to do that. We still have to be conscious of the cost side of the equation. But we want to really look for where's the value, where can we build the value, as opposed to squeezing blood from a stone. I think we're at a point in history now where we've really squeezed and maximized the efficiency as much as we can. We're really not going to get very much more out of it. And I think with all the technology and the way that things are changing, there's a huge ongoing issue there that has to be maintained. The other thing that I think is difficult to comprehend for a lot of organizations is the concept of risk. And it's really kind of dealing with the knowns and the unknowns. And I think we're in this environment today where there's a tremendous amount of change, and that change is just constant. It's becoming more and more. There's a gentleman here in town, his name is Nigel Cameron, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, but he runs the Center for the Policy of Emerging Technology. And Nigel spends a lot of his time thinking way out into the future, and helping to formulate policy for a point in time where he believes that we won't have to work anymore. Are we going to become slaves to the technology, or are we going to build an incredible humanitarian result as a part of that? But he has this concept that he calls the kink in the curve. And the kink in the curve is now, it's today. And when we look back, it's easy for us to see tremendous amounts of change. The iPhone didn't exist 10 years ago, Facebook, Google, the Tesla, all these new things that have come into the economy that didn't exist a short period of time ago. But when we turn around and we look to the future, we can't see it. We can't predict it. We don't know what's out there. So we think tomorrow is going to be just like today. And so as a result, we discount the risk associated with the change that's coming down the road. But in the back of our heads, we know there's exponential change. And so as a business, to me, that scares the hell out of me, because I don't know what's around the corner. But I have to have a business and an environment that can adapt to those kinds of conditions. So I like to think of disruptive change, and I define that it's often unpredictable, and two, it often conflicts with the core competency of the industry. So I tend to look at companies like Uber and what that's done to the taxi and the limousine industry. Amazon and what that's done to the book industry. And now Amazon is a disruptor to the shopping mall. So it's continuing to be that change. iTunes and what that did to the record industry. I mean, who buys records anymore? They're completely, unless you're a collector, they're completely gone. And then I think that the digital camera is another one that's a great example, because Kodak invented it, Sony really took advantage of it, but now it's the iPhone, and Sony's in trouble as a result of that. So it's something that I think we have to pay very close attention to. I think one of the other things that, as I spend a lot of time thinking about this, is that it's the economy that has really changed. I think back when we were in high school, Economics 101, we all learned about Adam Smith and the foundation of the economy, which was land, labor, and capital. Today, I think if you're in the real estate industry, it's probably still land, labor, and capital. But now it's really more about ideas. And you look at a company like Google, who can make $1 billion off of a good idea. And so those ideas are really necessary and important in order to build our businesses and sustain those businesses way out into the future. But those now are coming in the forms, they're intangible. They're the experiences that we have, they're the knowledges that we share, they're the services that we offer to people. But we have to constantly keep iterating those and innovating those types of things. So I've got a question for you, and I think like Rex, where were you when you had your last really great idea? That aha moment that Rex referred to. Anybody want to throw out a place?
Shower.
Any others?
In the hallway, talking to others.
Yeah, I think 80% of the responses I get to that question is the shower. For me, it's actually sitting in airplanes. And you get on an airplane and you're in there for a couple of hours, you're sealed off, there's no distractions. So all the junk that's inside of my head, I begin to process all these thoughts, and without the distractions, all those little brain particles start banging into each other, and I get these ideas. And so after a long flight, I'm like, wow, I just walk off that plane kind of recharged, and it's probably pretty scary for the guys back in the office when I get back, because then I'm on a terror. But the point there is that those ideas typically do not happen in the office. It's very hard for those to happen in the office, okay? Because if you're sitting at your desk, there's all these distractions. The phone, your colleagues, all the work that's trying to get done. It's that Cuisinart that Rex had described, in terms of the experience. But a sustainable business today requires innovation, and this kind of builds on the concept that Rex was talking about. So in order to have that innovation, you have to bring those ideas back in, and you have to be able to collaborate those. Now, I stand here as an architect and as a designer, and I have people say, I need collaborative spaces. The word collaboration is an extremely fuzzy concept for me. It's a very generic word. So I could probably sit here and sketch for you 40 or 50 different types of collaborative spaces today. And I think that's going to continue to grow. So one of the things that we have to be very careful about when we're working with our clients is understanding exactly how those companies need to collaborate, the type of technology that's involved, the types of interaction that are involved, the types of support and the work, and all of those things, have to fit into that space and they have to work seamlessly. The other aspect, as we learned from the Case for Space, was the whole engagement issue. And we are human beings. We're not human doings. And so as a result of that, we walk into the office space every day with a variety of social, emotional, and physiological conditions. And the work environments today really have to begin to adapt for that. So one of the discussions that's really starting to take place is all about health, wellness, well-being, and looking at the factors that really affect people's performance in those spaces that we're designing. So we really have to be much more conscious of that. I think the other thing is Rex talked about, with the kind of like Disney example, is each one of your organizations have something that's unique. And I think that we have to do a really careful job of capturing that in the spaces that we design. When somebody walks into your space, you have an opportunity to communicate a message. So, that space is really setting the context for the work that's getting done and how your people are interacting in that. So it's almost like you have to think about that as when they leave that space, what's the story that they're going to tell? What are they going to communicate to others about your business and the way that you work? And that's both for your employees as well as for your clients and others that may use the space. But it's also about how they feel. And I'm sure we've all walked into those spaces that we've dreaded. It's like the old Intel 1990s gray on gray model with the high work walls. It's like, I can't imagine anybody that would want to work in that space. I think fortunately today we've gotten a lot smarter. These are really, the kinds of criteria that I'm concerned about that affect the performance. This is much more important to your business than meeting 250 square feet per person. These are the things that are really going to drive your business forward, as we're thinking about it and what's special to your organization. So this today I would sort of posit is really the criteria that we have to look forward to. So our work environments have to be engaged. I think we have to create spaces that people are going to enjoy being in. They've got to enable that critical exchange of ideas. And so there's a lot of collisions that occur and people bumping into each other, and those ideas, they have to be iterated and leveraged, and ultimately, that's what you're going to build and sustain your business on. And these are some examples of some of the spaces that we've designed for our clients that I think really begin to demonstrate some of those different types of spaces. Each one is unique. Each one kind of captures a little bit of the culture of each organization. So what I'd like to do is kind of like walk through two extremes and kind of talk about different types of businesses and the types of space that I think that we see. And so if you can imagine that these are at the ends of each of a line, and your businesses are probably somewhere on that spectrum in between. So the one extreme is really work anywhere, where you're out and about, you're a highly agile, mobile workforce, and the other is work in the office, where you essentially have to have your people in the office in order to work. The work anywhere one, I would say, is probably more conducive to consulting firms, sales professionals, and service industries. These are ones that are very technology dependent, very highly mobile, out dealing with clients and client problems a lot of the time. Accenture, I think, is a great example of this. Accenture will tell you you shouldn't be in the office unless you absolutely have to be there. They will actually give you a per diem to go out and find other space outside of the traditional office to work in, and they want you to be on your client site in order to do that work. But they will arm you with the best technology. They'll enable you to communicate as best as you can. So it's got a very strong technology platform that they're going to build off of. And there's two reasons for that. One, it's going to enable you to provide better service to your client, but it's also going to enable you to have a better quality of life so that you can begin to mix that work and pleasure. And this is an example. This is a space that we did for Visa out in Ashburn, which I think kind of begins to show a little bit about what that's like. It's highly flexible, can adapt to a variety of different conditions. There's a tremendous amount of technology that goes into that, but people are really moving around within that space. The other one is the work in the office sort of concept. And this one I would say is really important to research organizations, to companies that are pushing innovation, and especially for technology businesses where there's rapid change. This is a company where you have to be, or a concept where you have to be present in order to innovate. This is where the critical exchange of ideas is important to the sustainability of that company long term. And so you have to be present in order to be there. It's very people-centric. And so if you look at Google as an example of that, and we've all seen Google creates all these amenity spaces and service areas for their employees to to share. What they want to do is they want to keep you there. They want you there as long as that you can. They want you to exchange ideas with your fellow associates and workers. And like I said before, Google's a company that can make $1 billion off of a good idea. And this is a space that we did. This is the Marriott's, they call it the Hub. It's the cafe out at Marriott. I don't know if any of you have been out there. It used to be very dark. We opened it up. Now there's a tremendous amount of different types of spaces in here. Rex was talking about the CBRE and there being 18 different types. This is probably very close to that. But you can sit there by yourself for lunch. You can sit there with a small group of people. You can sit there. There's places that have technology and monitors that you can plug into. You can work on a presentation. You can work on a spreadsheet. You can sit there in a quiet space and read a book if you want. This space, Jim Young from Marriott just showed a graph at CoreNet that I thought was very interesting. The graph was basically a timeline across the day, and it had one big blip in the middle, which was lunchtime, which was what the cafeteria used to be. Now the graph he shows, it basically goes up very quickly in the morning, stays level, there's a small blip for lunch, and then goes back to that high level position and then drops off at the end of the day. So people are using this space, they're working in this space essentially the entire workday. There's meetings that are in this space, and you even come down here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the space, it's packed. There's a buzz that's in that space. And so this is an example of a space that, where a corporation like Marriott has really it's become the town square for Marriott. Everybody comes in there and, has their ideas, and, they can meet and share all those ideas with each other. Now, I think for your own organizations, each one of you has something that's unique. And I think that's part of the charge that we have to look at today as we're considering the types of space that we're designing. Each of you has a separate sort of vision, strategy, and goal, that you're trying to achieve. And so, the tools that you have for that, we have to look at, the work that's being done and the type of support that's necessary for that work. We have to look at your people and some of the cultural aspects of that. And then we have to look at the place, the different types of places that are going to be able to support that work. And as Rex said, I think the one thing that we see today is that the space is really your opportunity. It's the context to set the culture for your organization. So that space has to really align with a lot of the behaviors and the types of values that your organizations hold and want to aspire to. So some of the things that we're involved in, looking at different tasks and activities, and how people use those. And we're seeing an increasing variety of different types of work, different tasks, different activities in the places that are necessary for those to take place. There's layers of technology now that are coming into the workplace, and we have to be conscious of that, and your spaces really need to have the infrastructure to support that. I like to think of space as a tool. Just like a fine wood craftsman has very good tools, or a shoemaker has good tools. Those tools are what enable you and really have a lot to do with the quality of the work that you do. So your desk is a tool. Just like a benching space might be a tool. You're not going to get the same work done in either of those environments. I just had the pleasure of being in Idea Paint's headquarters up in Boston, and one of the things that I found fascinating, they make that dry marker wall paint that you can put on your walls and use markers for. The walls in that space are just as important of a tool as the desks are. You walk in there and you see people, writing things on the walls. The information can stay on the walls. People that may have missed the meeting can come into the space and see, the evolution of the idea. They can contribute to that idea or add something to that idea, over a period of time. So the vertical surfaces and the walls are an extremely important tool, especially in the way that we work, because we're using it either for presentations or PowerPoint shows or just, to have ideas written on the walls today. I think the other thing that's important to consider too is the space beyond, and the space beyond the traditional office. And I had mentioned Accenture, paying their people. to get out. But there's a variety of different types of spaces that are available today that you can use. So you can think of Starbucks as a pretty basic example, or a Regis, or a WeWork type of space, or a co-working type of space. These are spaces that organizations are starting to use for either small teams or individuals to be able to go out and work in that are not necessarily connected to the traditional office environment. These are some examples of that. Liquid Space is essentially an app. So if Rex and I are going to New York and we have a meeting and we're on the train and we're meeting in Midtown, we can pull up the app, find what spaces are available in there, find one with 2 offices and a decent conference room. It's $150 a day. I can book it right there, I can pay for it right there, and we show up and it's our space for the day. And so it's highly mobile. It's the Uber of office space. And so that's something. WeWork is a very interesting concept. It's a highly social, very collaborative work environment, and they provide a tremendous amount of support to the people that use those spaces. So it could be anywhere from an individual to a small a group of people, a small firm. But organizations are actually using those spaces today where they might have a special team that they want to understand or want to study a special project or a certain type of research. Design Lab, this was really the landlord's response to the increasing flexibility of space. We participated with Vornado in the design of a group of spec suites in Crystal City, and they've been challenged trying to market a tremendous amount of space down there. And so this was one thing where they opened up the door, got a lot of different ideas for it, and have been fairly successful, and they did a great job of promoting it. But the landlords today also need to provide some of that flexibility for the tenants because there's a variety of different needs that are out there. And then Convene. Convene is basically a meeting facility or an event facility. So it's something where an event like this could take place. We could be doing this in Convene. They would provide all the food service, all the technology, and all the audiovisual service that's required, and you essentially pay for it by a day, half a day, or a couple of hours, depending on what your event is. So these types of spaces are becoming more important to organizations as you're thinking about your space, and you can make your space a little bit more efficient as a result of it. So as Rex was talking about, and I think some of the things that we're seeing out there is that the future really is kind of podular. And by podular, I mean these are the departments, these are the teams, these are the individuals within your organization that are really going to drive either programs, missions, or special work efforts forward. Those organizations, those small teams really need to be highly networked and need to be well supported. I think if you look at the Navy SEALs as an example of that, the Navy SEALs are a highly trained group of professionals. They go in there, they have the best technology, they're networked, and they have all the information and the data that they need. But they are autonomous in the decision making that they have, and they can make those decisions out in the field, but everything gets communicated back, and they have the support of a much larger organization behind them. So the last thing that I'd want to say is I kind of want to end on a story. Rex talked a little bit about the CBRE space out in LA, and it was a great experience to get out there and see that space. And this was probably one of the sort of most traditional things. I'm sitting at lunch at this very nice restaurant. There's 5 white guys in suits and ties, all from Fortune 500 companies, except for me. And I had the pleasure to sit next to Gil Barak, who is the Deputy CFO of CBRE Corporate. So we had just been through the tour of their space. It's very exciting. It's completely open, free address, everything's glass, very different from what they had come from. And like Rex had kind of said, there's a lot of really great stories behind that space. But what sort of interested me was, sitting next to the CFO, I'm thinking, okay, this guy's the bean counter. So I asked Gil, I said, tell me, how do you describe your space to your peers? And without hesitation, Gil goes, Bob, he's like, we've got happy people. He says, they're collaborating. He's like, I've met people in the organization that I've never even met before. He says, we're getting a lot more work done. And so I'm expecting this guy to shoot back at me some like numbers-driven formula, metric kind of thing, and it wasn't that at all. So I followed up. I said, Gil, all right, let me ask you another question. I said, what's the one metric that you look at that describes the performance of your space, when you're trying to understand it? And again, without hesitation, he comes back and he says, Bob, it's EBITDA. He says, I can look at our bottom line from the year before, and I can look at our bottom line today, and I can see the difference. It's clear as a bell. Over a 10-year period, they're expected to save $9 million. That's $900,000 a year, and that's on a space that's about 50,000 square feet. So it was sort of very eye-opening for me to hear the CFO, speak that way about the space that they had just occupied. So with that kind of concludes the formal part of this presentation. I think Rex and I would be happy to answer questions. It's almost 6:30, so I know you guys want to be respectful of your time. We'll be happy to stick around and answer any questions. There's still plenty of food and drink, but we'll be happy to answer a few questions if there's any. So thank you.